Coogs house. The Houston Cougars were 65 seconds away from a national title last season, looking to move forward and next season cut down those nets in April. But they still have this whole contract thing to take care of. Let's get into Locked On Cougs.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to step by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate you making us the first listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs for the everydayer that you are. If you want to join the conversation but you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below. Okay, this is actually for a segment on Tuesday, potentially. Over the weekend, Zeke Mayo posted a picture of the jersey that he lost to Houston in Fog Allen and called it the Houston collapse or something to that extent while he was selling game-used jerseys from himself online. Tell us in the comments down below what your favorite potential game-used opponent's jersey would be and what your title for it is. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Best place to make sure you're doing the best wealth building with your money. We got a whole lot to break into today. I do want to get to baseball on the weekend that baseball had at the end of the episode. That's segment 3. Segment 2, I want to talk about where March Madness will be held next season and how that will impact the Houston Cougars. But first and foremost, the news of the weekend is that as we hit Monday morning, we are still waiting to hear about Kelvin Sampson's contract extension with the Houston Cougars. Now, it does not sound like there's any option that he doesn't sign a contract. This is a dotting I's, crossing T's kind of scenario. And they're coming out of last year's season, and it's just now May 11th. Houston played until the final day of the season on April 7th. They're very, very close, Eddie Nuñez said last week when speaking to the media. I thought it was interesting that, in talking about other things actually, Nuñez talked about the financial impact of that deep tournament run, the all-way national title game that the Houston men's basketball program had. Said that it was the biggest TV number game in college basketball since the 2018 national title game, which was Villanova's second title in 3 years. All the views and impressions and all the social media things around it too made it feel like even bigger by a lot of metrics. Nuñez threw the number in the press conference that it may have been over $6 billion in terms of revenue over the course of the Final Four week on its own. Now, I think that actually would be divided among the 4 schools. But either way, that's a $6 billion number. And for what it's worth, this will be my 1-minute spiel here. I actually think that it's more than that because I think it's deeper than that. When you make these kinds of runs, when you have this kind of an athletic program with this kind of a Houston Cougar basketball team at the front of it, you're putting on a different looking porch on your house. The athletic department is the porch, the entryway, the thing people drive by and see for your university. And I don't think you can really calculate how impactful that March Madness and championship run were. It's deeper than what the TV rating was or whatever. And those are the more immediate numbers. But how many kids are going to apply and go to the University of Houston now because it's a cool place to go, or because they want to cheer for a basketball program, or because they see the student section having fun and going crazy, and they're going to apply to Houston as opposed to schools XYZ, and then they grow up and they're alumni, and they buy tickets and season ticket packages as alumni, as young alumni in Houston. They raise kids to go to games. They're buying hot dogs and T-shirts and whatever. I don't having that impactful of a program is actually bigger than whatever the TV dollar amount was. But the TV dollar amount is fairly present tense, and it's a lot of money. Nuñez did say that he waited until after the season was over to talk to Sampson. Gave him, it sounded like a little bit of breathing time from that even, so it's not pretty fresh still. Had been talking to the agent since February. sounds like all parties want Sampson in Houston. Sampson wants to be there. His current contract had him earning $4.6 million last year, and they're looking to build on that. Presently set to make $4.8 in 2025-26 and $5 million 26-27. For what it's worth, building on that would put him into that echelon of top coaches in terms of dollars earned in college basketball. Bruce Pearl at Auburn has a $5.4 million base. After some fairly simple incentives kick in, he's getting over $7 million a year. Tom Izzo signed a $6.2 million a year lifetime contract with some incentives at the end of that contract. Lifetime contract, into the contract, I know. That I think are interesting. At his retirement, he has the option to have an advisor in athletics role built in. It's a transition written into the contract. Calipari just got to Arkansas. He's got a $6.5 million base salary. He got up to $8.5 last year. And Bill Self, I saw a report as a 9.63 base, but he earned over $13 million, even as poorly as Kansas played last season. So I say all that to say, right, that Sampson is coaching as well as or better than these other guys, and the comparable numbers are there. We've also heard that part of this reworking is you get some money for his assistants, and they just Akano is the new assistant men's coach. You got to promote Hollis Price and that, and working out the dollars and cents and all that. We also have heard for a long time that part of the written in deal here is transitioning Kellen Sampson from assistant coach to head coach whenever Kelvin decides to hang it up, and that's really important. We also know that his daughter's got a role on the staff in terms of marketing, communications, and the visible portion of the program. Does a great job with those kinds of things as well. All of that's great, and I think that that's all part of this negotiation. I wonder if part of this is also the bit about Tom Izzo at the end of his contract, right? And what he's got worked in there. I don't know when Kelvin hangs it up. It sounds like, frankly, if you talk to anyone around the program, he's in higher spirits coming off of a national title loss than he's been in quite some time. Like, he's energized to get back and do it again and build, right? He's got a great group of freshmen coming in, number one class in America. He's returning a lot of last year's team. And if Milo Suzanne opts to get out of the draft, he's returning 4 of the 8-man rotation. Like, this is ultimately, I think, a great program to be building further and further and further. We're not looking backwards, right? That has energized Sampson. The freshman coming in has energized Sampson, right? Seeing his guy Quan go get a head coaching job, I think, has energized Sampson. I wonder, though, if they win it all in 2026, maybe they go back-to-back, win 26 and 27, right? If he once worked into his contract that whenever he hangs it up, not just that Kellen gets the head job, but that Kelvin himself gets some other role within the program or within the athletic department. Kelvin does not strike me as someone who will retire with ease. That is to say that he doesn't strike me as someone who's going to like retire and just stop working, go to Galveston and hang on the beach a whole lot, right? That's not quite what I see. I can imagine he's going to have a good time doing whatever he's doing. I would hope he does things like sleep more and get some rest whenever the retirement day comes. I wonder, though, if he's finding ways to change what that life after he hangs it up looks like. Kellen getting the job is important. The assistant staying on is important. I wonder if his role within athletics is important. And it's important to note in looking at that, while Tom Izzo is signed up to do that at Michigan State and all those kinds of things, and Houston did just change athletic directors, right? Whatever handshaky kind of things that there might have been, and this is not reporting, this is hypothetical looking at things, right? But if Sampson had some deal with Pesman, like, okay, and then I'm going to get to, whenever I retire, I'm going to be an advisor for this. I'm going to talk to you about that. You're going to bring me in for that, right? Whatever. If it wasn't in writing, or even if it was, you'd rework that with a new AD. And I don't think those things will ever possibly go south enough for Sampson to not sign the next contract. That he's on our contract for the next 2 years anyway. It just is interesting to see what the hang up is, what is holding that negotiation back. And what kinds of things come out of it will be interesting to see. And it sounds like we'll see them fairly soon. And I think that that's going to be interesting to watch. I'd imagine you're looking at him getting over $5 million in base salary in the next 2 seasons each, as opposed to finishing there in 2027. Get him up to more of the Bruce Pearl, Tom Izzo kind of number in the 5 to 6 range, with Houston getting a full share of Big 12 money very soon. And all of I think that all makes sense. He runs the most successful program on campus, bar none. It makes sense that he'd get the most competitive relative to his peers' salary. And I think that it's hard to argue he didn't earn it. When you look around at what all these other coaches have done, I mean, Self at Kansas feels like an outlier because he's making money on past successes and whatever back when the game was a lot different. But Calipari just signed a contract at Arkansas, coming off of Kentucky. And like I said, he got a $6.5 million base that went up to an $8.5 million year last year. It's hard to argue that Sampson doesn't at least deserve the 6. So we'll see where that goes. But if that's your comparison, it's pretty hard to argue. And so we'll see where that goes over the week as it comes. I think you'll see some movement on that in the next 2 weeks. I think it'll be done pretty soon, but we'll cover more on that as it hits. I also want to talk some about March Madness next season, not just because Kelvin Sampson will be on the sidelines for it, but because the location may be interesting, as Toyota Center is a potential spot. Let's get into it in 1 second. Before we get to that, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Monarch Money. And if you checked your bank account, spent a lot of money on Final Four swag or that trip with, hit the credit card, it's just, constant, whatever the case may be, check your bank accounts. You're like, oh my God, where did my money go? It can add up pretty quickly. And that's where Monarch Money is here to help you out as your personal CFO, full visibility over all your finances. It is not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place so you stop just managing money and start building your wealth. I like how simple the app is, how much the dashboard command center's got everything right there. Again, teacher, podcaster, basketball coach. I got all these things going on, all these checks coming in from different places. I can see them all funneling into one spot and how they all divvy up and where they all go, because they all go places at some point. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. It's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your whole first year. Park Rangers Locked On Coogs here, looking at Houston in March Madness in 2026. Now, I know people can tell me I'm getting ahead of myself, but Houston has been the number 1 seed in 3 consecutive seasons. If Milo Steussen opts out of the draft process post-Combine, which I think a lot of people are assuming he will, but it's not a foregone conclusion, and frankly, the Combine goes well, power to him, go get that money, young man. But if he were to opt out of that process, Houston returns 4 of the 8 rotational guys from last year's national title appearance, 3 of the starters. They also welcome in the number 1 recruiting class in America. And now in the men's tournament, I was going back pretty far, but I cannot find an example, neither could the AI tools I had helping me, of a team being a number 1 seed 4 times in a row. Duke has done it 3 times from 98 to 2000. Michigan State did it 3 times between 99 and 01. Kansas did it 3 times from 95 to 97. North Carolina, 07, 08, 09. Houston just did it right in 2023, 4 and 5. But no one has done it 4 times. And while the history might seem insurmountable, when you look at what Houston's got coming back, it does not seem crazy to think that team could be one of the 4 best teams in America by the time March Madness comes around. They'll probably into the season in the preseason top 3, if not number 1. Most people have them in the way too early polls that people have right now in the top 5 in America. We talked before how I think anything outside of 1, given the roster as it's looking, is kind of disrespectful on the surface. But the city of Houston and the University of Houston are slated to host an NCAA regional next season. The Southern regional of the 4, the South, East, West, and Midwest would be coming through. Anyway, the Southern regional will be coming through Houston, and that would mean that the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games would be hosted at Toyota Center. The University of Houston is designated as a host. That was decided back in 2020. Houston was supposed to be a host city in 2020. That tournament, the University of Houston was as well. That tournament was canceled famously for that whole COVID thing. And per NCAA rules, a host school cannot be in the regional that they play in or play in a stadium in their regional that they played 3 or more home games in that year. Houston is very intentionally not playing more than 3 home games in Toyota any season, let alone next season, for a variety of reasons, one of which is the Fertitta Center has great home court advantage. It does not make sense to have a bunch of games at the Toyota Center when you can play at Fertitta and get real home court advantage in those non-conference matchups, right? But Eddie Nuñez, per the Houston Chronicle, I believe it was Duarte reporting it, says that the university is seeking clarification and simultaneously talking to other partners about passing on those hosting duties in order to have playing the Sweet 16 Elite 8 games at Toyota as an option. That would likely mean Rice, Texas Southern, Houston Christian, Prairie View, Lamar, Sam Houston State. Some combination of those would host. The Big 12 has reportedly said they're not going to host it, which, I can go on my tangent here for a second, is completely freaking bogus. The Big 12 has hosted in Kansas City, allowing Kansas to play in that region as recently as 2023. They hosted the Southern Regional in 2024 in Dallas. Houston got to play in that one because it was in Dallas. The Pac-12 doesn't even really exist, and they got to host a regional on the West Coast in the Chase Center in San Francisco. That the Big 12 is not an option here is absolutely bonkers, and it would not impact Houston in the same kind of way. Houston would be able to play, theoretically, in the Toyota Center if Big 12 hosted, and apparently that's not going to be an option. So you're looking at these smaller schools. It is not uncommon for smaller schools to host. UTSA hosted the South Regional in 2022. Houston saw Arizona and Villanova, if you remember, in that Sweet 16 and Elite 8. There's a whole deal in that one, if you don't remember, about Villanova potentially having the same thing happen. They ended up getting a 2 seed, so it didn't matter, but they were looking at being a 1 seed and playing in the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia because Penn was hosting. The big discrepancy there was that Villanova had actually played 4 home games, air quotes, in the Fargo Center. Didn't end up mattering. They got put in the Southern region at the 2 seed. Houston played the Elite 8. Now, we don't want to talk about that after that. Incarnate Word and UTSA hosted the Final Four last year in San Antonio. Small schools can host these things, right? It would not be uncommon for these smaller athletic departments to partner or to work together or to just host it outright. And I say all that to say that, A, there were several people on Twitter that told me this couldn't happen back when I was saying it could happen, and this feels kind of nice to talk about how it can happen. Feels nice. But I think perhaps more importantly, this tells us 2 things. One, Nuñez is getting on it. He's been on campus less than a year, and he is looking out here. He's like, okay, how can we get this program and this city behind itself at the Toyota Center next March? How can we recreate what Purdue and to all those home court type of advantages we talked about the Midwest region having, that Houston had to play, right? How can we get that in their favor, in the Houston Cougars' favor next season, right? Purdue played near home and gave Houston all they wanted in that Sweet 16 matchup. How can we have that at home? Looking forward. I love it out of Eddie there. Second, I also think it's worth pointing out that what you're looking at here is a way to continue to grow the university's footprint, even if that means like we're okay giving up the financial impact of hosting, right? Theoretically, a host school can gain some money based on gates and revenues and workers and so on. Really, it's not a big deal in terms of like the billions of dollars to run segment 1 making it to the NCAA finals, but it is certainly something for smaller programs. It's why you see a lot of smaller programs do it. It's also why you see a lot of conferences do it. And it's worth pointing out that Houston has looked like it might have graduated past that, whereas in 2020, I don't know that you could have totally said that back when they were handed this, right? Further, the national championship game, the Final Four national championship game in 2026 are in Indianapolis. And, I don't necessarily know that it's a big deal but she did just play there to just make that trip. And you want something close to home. And if you can't play in Toyota, you're looking at playing, long way away for every set of games in March. And that feels like a lot to ask for fans to travel constantly. Houston fans have traveled well in March, and we saw that in San Antonio last year on his couple-hour drive. Houston, frankly, had a pretty good showing relative to the distance in Indianapolis. But all of that said, I feel fairly confident here that ultimately what you're looking at for Houston is they want to make sure that they have Sweet 16 Elite 8 games that fans can come to. And the most realistic option for that is going to be in the Toyota Center. And so we'll see how this unfolds. It might all be for naught, but it's not for not trying. And I appreciate that part out of Eddie Nuñez and the crew. I don't know if it ever amounts to anything, but we're going to get into that as it unfolds. Speaking of things unfolding before our eyes, Houston Cougar baseball had an interesting weekend, to say the least. Let's jump into that. But first, Locked on Coogs, your host Parker Ainsworth, talking about Houston Cougar baseball, who surprised us in the middle of the night on Friday night. I say middle of the night because I was actually fast asleep by the time this game finished. I had to watch the replay on ESPN Plus. It's a great way to do that on Saturday. And basically, the only game we're going to talk about here extensively is the first game from Friday because Houston got beat pretty badly on Saturday and Sunday. Saturday, Houston lost 13-3. Sunday, they lost 13-1 and ended the game early. But on Friday, the Houston Cougars beat Arizona State, and what was, at least from a standings perspective, an upset of upsets, and from a way it played out perspective, kind of interesting one as well. Look, Arizona State had a really good, I believe it was the fourth inning, and then they got a handful of runs in, got up 4-1, and you saw kind of some interesting back and forth in the fifth inning, and then the sixth inning comes around, and 5 pitches in, Houston has 2 guys on base and no outs, and it took just walks. Arizona State hit Jimenez to open up the inning, took a fastball to the rib cage, and it kind of felt like that pissed Houston off a little bit. I'd say that. They pissed Houston off a little bit. Next guy's a 4-pitch walk. The third batter, and I think it stands to reason that this might be an important play in that game, hits a slow roller to third and legs it out and gets to first base. So suddenly, Houston's got bases loaded, no outs, a total of 10 pitches into the inning. Houston ended up walking in a bunch of runs and ultimately ended up winning that game 6-5. And so they win one, they peel one off Arizona State over the weekend. Arizona State is ranked number 2 in the Big 12 right now in baseball. And Houston's closer to the bottom. And so we'll take it, right? We'll take something on the road, especially playing on the desert. They've got big bats, et cetera, right? We're not going to talk about games 2 and 3 because that was not great. But after all of that, Houston still finds himself sitting at 10th, a half a game out of 9th place. And this feels important because that 8th, 9th game, they would actually play each other the way the Big 12 bracket shakes down. And that feels winnable. If you get up into 9th, right, the 8th place team is Oklahoma State. You played them earlier this season and kind of had a weirdly competitive weekend with them. You beat them on Friday. There was no Saturday game for weather, and then the whole Sunday debacle where Whitting had the embarrassing, walk off the field slowly after he gets tossed kind of thing. And as embarrassing as that was, you almost got out of that weekend with 1 win and 2 did not completes, right? We've been over that before, but if you don't remember, Whitting, the game had to go 5 innings to count before they had the final time of travel time cancellation or whatever. And Whitting threw a fit after he got ejected and slowly walked off the field to try and drag out the final inning as long as he could to try and make sure that they did not finish the game before the time ran out. Didn't work. It was a little embarrassing. But you theoretically, you feel competitive with Oklahoma State after having that. And that would be the 8th versus the 9th game. If you did that, and theoretically, if you're the 9 seed and won the 8 seed game, then you play Arizona State in the second round, and we just saw you can beat them. Now, you lost 2 games really bad, but you can beat them, right? And so I think you got to feel better about that than any of the other top 4 seeds that would get a bye. And so, I think that would be shaping up for a good Big 12 tournament, especially for a team that was not in the Big 12 tournament didn't make the cut a year ago, right? And second year in the conference, you go first year, you don't make the tournament. Second year, you're in the tournament. Third year, we're expecting you to make some noise in the tournament. I don't think that's an unreasonable progression. Say what you want about Whitting, say what you want about the program. I don't think that's an unreasonable progression for a baseball team to be making. And frankly, I think I'm going to lose some people. I think that's good enough for the guy to keep his job. The embarrassment from Oklahoma State might override it. But I wonder if you could argue that's enough improvement year over year to move forward. And regardless, you got an important series against Arizona State this weekend for all this seeding. Or against Arizona this weekend. Played Arizona State last weekend. Arizona this weekend is important for seeding because Tech is that 9 seed and they play BYU. BYU is bad. Like really bad. Tech may sweep that series. They're a half game ahead of Houston. If they sweep, you can't do anything about it, right? You're also, however, a half game out of 12th, right? Now you're going to make the tournament. You're in the tournament. The top 12 teams make the tournament, but you're only half game out of 12th, and that's a whole different kind of problem. Right, so got to make a run here. Playing Arizona this weekend, they're the 5th seed right now, and they're a full game out of the 4th seed, and so they're going to be playing to win for the same kinds of reasons. They only get that 4th seed to get themselves a bye in the tournament. Right, for what it's worth, TCU is the 4th seed currently. That didn't go so well when Houston played them the first time. Right, now if you lose to Arizona and Baylor sweeps a bad Central Florida team, you actually probably have to play Arizona again in the first round of the Big 12 tournament. And you want to see how you do against Arizona this weekend, and you want to feel good about yourself going into that Big 12 tournament game. So you want to kind of put something good out there to kind of have some good vibes, some mojo and whatever. And I don't say that just flippantly. Baseball tournaments, whether it's the Big 12 tournament, the American Athletic Conference tournament, or even Omaha, it's really more about getting hot, getting in the dance, getting hot at the right time, having the talent to carry you once you get there, right? Houston's done the first part. Houston's got to get hot in the second part, and then we'll see about the third part. I think they got some talented hitters on this team. Xavier Perez had a great year. I feel like we're talking a lot more about Tyler Cox lately. Looking at this baseball team as well. And so I said to say that, like, if they feel good about themselves against Arizona, then maybe that's an okay matchup. If they get the Arizona State matchup, then they know that they can beat them, right? TCU is tough. You did win the first game, but it felt a lot like this Arizona State one went, where you won the first one against TCU and you lost the next 2 a combined 28-5. And that's a weird combination that maybe when the season's over, we can talk about some. Is like they won a lot of Friday games. I was actually talking to Coogs on Twitter DMs and stuff earlier. They won a lot of Friday games, which is theoretically the best pitcher of the opponent. And then trying to get obliterated in the Saturday, Sunday games throughout the season, all these different Big 12 series. And that's a weird, for it to happen that often is odd. And so we'll see. Arizona goes this weekend. They're wearing blues. One of the games this weekend after the weather cancellation of the A&M game. And we'll talk about the season ending, when it ends, and how it went. But until then, we hear each and every day with Locked On Coogs. So hit subscribe and hit the bell so you know when we're live. Locked On Coogs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Coogs.